Hails and welcome to Rauta. This is Jerry doing a Archgoat discography run, also known as retrospective. Why Archgoat? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, some people you already know that I did Archgoat interview a few years ago in my home city with the main man of the band. The second reason is I recently revisited my whole album collection in terms of letter A, which meant I went through my Archgoat albums. Well, CDs anyway. Vinyl are still waiting. Now, these two reasons kind of put me into the work list of doing Archgoat discography retrospective run to talk about the music, picking also my favorite albums so far, or favorite ones, least favorites, whatever you call it. I'll also talk about a little about the artwork, lyrics, etc. Now, it's not too complicated even though Archgoat is a old band. It's really an old band. But the thing here is they never did too many albums, despite their many years of existence. And we'll delve into that territory right now. So let's tune in for Archgoat Metal Archives website here as the backdrop and talk about this band that got started in my home city already back in 1989. Mind you, this band was more or less founded by the two brothers. Also then, of course, a drummer as a third member. But what is curious about these guys that when I was around when the band was founded, I was like, 14? Obviously, I was too young to even know about the band back in the days. Now, these brothers are a little bit older than me, a couple of years. So, of course, they being on their later years of teenage and all, very, very much focused around this kind of metal music and, delving into the world of extreme metal, namely death metal and black metal. A couple of years later, already in the 90s, they released their first demo, 1991, Jesus Spawn, which, of course, brought them some attention, put them on the table, gave them name among the other Finnish bands doing black metal related music. I'm saying black metal related because Archgoat has never been pure blood second wave or first wave black metal band in terms of what you might interpret from coming from, Sweden, Norway, and like. Why I said Sweden first is obviously, there was Bathory and of course there was Celtic Frost coming from Switzerland and other bands. So whether you call the 1980s black metal and say hello, kind of copy your style, or whether you talk about Norwegian or Swedish black metal in the 90s, Archgoat kind of stood apart. Yes, they were closer in style, whatever Beherit around the same years were doing. So Finnish black metal was from the get-go a little bit different, and Archgoat was still is an important part of the whole foundation of what is known nowadays Finnish black metal scene. There were not too many bands. I would say basically Archgoat and Beherit were the two first ones, but you will really sometimes want more than one or two pair of legs. Well, more than two legs to put your table on. And I would say, yes, you kind of need to include Impel Nazarene and Barathrum to make it like a table with four legs. And these four legs are the ones that, in my opinion, more or less factually also, means that Finnish black metal was founded upon. Now, since we're not going to talk about the other bands here so much, but focus on the Archgoat, let's start going through their discography. Now, what you need to know that in terms of discography run means that I went through the full albums and the demo. I didn't go all the EPs or splits and all that stuff. First of all, there's a couple of reasons. There are overlapping songs, so one doesn't really have to understand the whole concept, every live album or whatever smaller release is in order to figure out where Archgoat is. The second reason is always with my retrospective or worst to best videos, I focus on the albums. But it would kind of be unfair to start with Whore of Bethlehem from 2006 in terms of talking about Archgoat. Why? Because the band existed 15 years before that. So listening to the root material and comparing them to albums later on is very, very important, a vital part of the whole deal here. Now, because I could go in various order through the whole discography or talk about the covers, talk about the lyrics and so forth, this needs to get kind of figured out from the basics. First, let's tackle the whole musical style of Archgoat. Now, with many bands, it's easy to say, Iron Maiden plays British heavy metal. That's pretty much how it goes. Or you could say that Slayer plays thrash metal. But it gets complicated with a lot of bands who have changed their style throughout the years. And then you cannot just say this band is only one style and all that stuff. Luckily for us fans and the like, Archgoat has always stayed true to their own style. That is, despite being in the game for more than 30 years, well, you can say 20 something if you exclude the years when the band wasn't really active around here for a few years, 10 years or so. Still, they have been always true to their own style. I mean, when they came back early 2000s or mid 2000s with their EP and then full album, it was obviously kind of a clear and really good so that they continued whatever they had going on in the early 90s. That is what is labeled here on Metal Archive genre, death/black metal. I think it's very important to understand what it really means. Now, certain riffs are certainly pure black metal when it comes to Archgoat. That's kind of a given. Also, you could make the claim that the lyrics are pure black metal, more or less. Then again, there are satanic death metal bands, so it's not really that defining that, okay, they have satanic lyrics, they have anti-Christian lyrics, let's go and call them black metal, whatever the music style is. So, in terms of death metal versus black metal, Archgoat has always had like one foot on the other side and one foot on the other. Exactly what I grew up with. So I'm totally okay, and I think it's more than factual thing to say, or more than factual, but you get what I mean, to say they are death metal and black metal at the same time, hence death black metal. Now a lot of people might point this like, okay, this is the kind of a continuation to bands like Beherit, Blasphemy, what have you, or even the Brazilian bands like Sarcophago. Yes, that's kind of a true, but Archgoat never went exactly to the thrash metal territory. So certain parts coming from the, say, Brazilian scene is not exactly very much comparable to whatever Archgoat had doing. Because, I mean, their riffs certainly have more in their DNA to kind of a Beherit thing or a Blasphemy thing than the bands that went a little bit like death thrash or black thrash. And certainly if you would compare Archgoat to, say, Bathory, for instance, which is kind of a black thrash, if you want to consider first wave of black metal that, yeah, Archgoat doesn't really sound like that at all. So it was clearly, obviously inspired by a lot of other bands, and by the turn of the 80s to the 90s, it's obvious that early 80s albums, well, they probably didn't have such clear impact. I mean, you don't really find things like Venom or Bathory or Celtic Frost in terms of music, even less so if we go to world of, I guess, Merciful Fate, Sodom, what have you. But since this is not about inspiration, that is what the bands do follow, and some of these things we have gone through in our interview. This is my take on the band, and I'm gonna point you some things that some of you already know. I mean, it's rather obvious, and some of you might find interesting to just figure it out. Like, Jesus Christ, I never thought of that. Now, since Archgoat was founded by teenager guys, it is kind of a sad, but not that, really hard to understand why they decided to do something else after a while. To be honest, there was this commentary from an old school friend of mine who had been following extreme metal scene for a long time, and he said back in the days, like when Archgoat was started, they were not that well received as later on. No, I wasn't around then, so I can really confirm this one way or another. I can't really challenge that. Maybe it was so. Maybe that partially put the band okay, let's call it quits and do something else. But then again, when you're going your teenager years, you might do one thing for a while and then do totally different for a while. For example, these guys went totally different genre, even outside metal, for a lot of years. When I got to meet the brothers for the first time, they really didn't look like typical black metalhead. Actually, that was more like behind them. Now, I don't know the details what made them come back. Maybe someone has told it. Maybe it was actually in the interview. I don't remember all the details. But whatever the reason, the guys came back and like I said, they decided to keep it true, which is something that I totally respect a lot. Instead of renewing their style or becoming something else, they went okay, this is Archgoat, we're gonna do it like that. And ever since they have been back Now, 20 years later, they're still doing the same, which I find absolutely fantastic. It's not so much like I consider Archgoat be the best black death metal band out there, like forever or all times. I mean, they are good, but that's beside the point. It's more like I consider this valuable because when times are challenging you to change, when you change over time, you get older, blah, 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 some people have hard time keeping it to the original idea. Think a lot of these bands nowadays, which have been existing for eternity, a lot of them change style. Metallica would be the grand example if you want a big band. But then again, you could also take a lot of black metal bands from the 90s or death metal bands and see like how they changed, how they became something totally different. It doesn't matter if you go beyond the borders of extreme metal. There are plenty of examples. So it's not given that the band keeps true to their original style and is able also to make it good. I think that's quite of an achievement, something that we should take our hats off, give a little bit of a tip. Okay, this is the kind of a basic background what we have. Let's start going. So since Jesus Spawn, the band started with their old school black death metal combination, having the elements of Blasphemy, Bear and the like in their music. Not too many songs. I think this demo has kind of stood the test of time with 12 minutes and all that stuff. It's not the best of the pile, obviously, but it's already good with their style. It's fierce, it's aggressive, it's dark, and man, it's old school. It's unapologetic how you go with the themes in the music. I mean, surely you could see, yeah, it's kind of a teenager thing, but then again, so what? This is black metal. This is not about some poetry. This is not some adult thing. Now, 10, 15 years later, when came Whore of Bethlehem, you had this full album, 35 minutes, and the lyrics, which I'm going to address later on. And this was exactly basically the same. Just more, better, maybe songwriting focused, obviously better handle of instruments, better, production and all that stuff. And by the way, this is worth mentioning. When you go for the lineup, you will see it's mostly the same brothers. Lord Angel Slayer, bass and vocals, having the rather recognizable voice, and Ritual Butcher on guitars. These are the brothers. When you go for the other stuff, you will see that there are people doing mixing, mastering, engineering, whatever. And these are different people, but everybody is from the scene. You will see Satanic War Master's Werewolf on some records. You will see Taneli Hataka, who's known for a few extreme metal bands, black metal and death metal over the years, or Molester Gaddis, who used to run the label Hammer of Faith. So there are lots of underground people involved in the Archgoat, so to say, background forces. What is also important is that Chris Moyen, creating the artwork, is the man who has done all the artwork. But we'll get to that later on. So Whore of Bethlehem, the first album, was like proving that the band was no accident with their first demo and whatever followed that. Then came Light Devouring Darkness 3 years later, improving, in my opinion, whatever was happening here with Whore of Bethlehem. Now, these two are, in my opinion, kind of siblings to really one another. Then it took 6 years. Well, there were splits and all, and band obviously touring. The Apocalyptic Triumphator, being the third album, and proving third album is not always the hard one. There's a saying among reviewers like, first the band creates the first album, you put all your ideas there. Then you do the second album, maybe improving and using some of the leftovers, and then you're like following the challenge, like, what the hell? It's time to do the third album. How can we be the same without sounding too much the same? How we are able to renew ourselves but not go too far or whatever. You're probably run out of ideas by this point. Sometimes third album takes a little bit more time. Luckily, this, in my opinion, kind of improves from the two first albums and showcases a band that is not ashamed what they do. They keep going on and probably improved a lot. Still, line up as the first two albums, Lord Angel Slayer, Ritual Butcher, and Sinister. And that was, by the way, an end of an era. In a way, because 3 years later, when you would go for the lineup, you would see a different lineup. Surely the brother is still in the game, but now Diabolus Silverum, who is a part of the live tours as well, doing keyboards. He was so-called fourth member, maybe behind the curtain on live occasions, but still nonetheless. But now you have Goat Aggressor, who is also known for various bands throughout the years, being drummer and all, and he's the current drummer of Archgoat nowadays. Now there has been a couple of other drummers, if you would go to the members list and see the past members, you would see, yes, Sinister is the actually third drummer of the band because, he was not the original one, not the second one, but the longest lasting drummer. Then there was Venom, known for Horna and other bands, Drew Black Dawn, whatever, doing drums for a couple of years. And you had some members which are not even listed here, which is kind of curious to be honest, but those who know. Then there was live musicians. Well, actually it's here mentioned. Lenneth, the Unholy Carnage, a good childhood friends of the guys. Here it's just mentioned as live musician because he didn't play on the albums. But a lot of us remember him as the second drummer of Archgoat, the original drummer of the comeback, if you will, because, well, he was there. He is still among our friends, did the bars and all that stuff. And then you had another drum member here who is playing in various bands and all that stuff. Now, I don't know if this still has all the drums. I think there was session live members beyond these guys, but I wouldn't put my head on it. Anyway, the point here is, technically speaking, you have three eras when it comes to drummers. The demo era, then Sinister era, the 3 albums, and the latest one with Go the Crusher. Curiously enough, the songs never changed too much. The albums didn't change too much. In my opinion, maybe Luciferian Crown actually got a little bit more old school than the 3 first albums. There was kind of like battery-like vibes with this album, and that's the same goes with the Worship Eternal Darkness as well. But still, whatever album you go, it's always solid Archgoat. There are no points where you feel like, what the hell is this? This doesn't really belong here. It's always the kind of a bestial death black metal. Faster parts, but not exactly a blast beat band. Slower mid-tempo parts, very fitting for the heavy, dark atmosphere. Now I got a little bit lost here. We're talking about the albums. My point here is, throughout the years, the pattern has always been the same. It's like rather short songs, 3 minutes or so, including always an intro, which is kind of a recycled. And for example, this album, 35 minutes, 10 tracks. You could go for their Worship Eternal tracks, 41 minutes, 10 tracks. So it's always about 30 to 40 minutes, 10 tracks or so. I mean, you can get to see it here also. 10 tracks, 35 minutes. So whatever the album is, the pattern is kind of the same. This is barely less than 30 minutes, 10 tracks. So the pattern is always the same. Now, when it comes to the lyrics, I think Metal Archives has it pretty nicely summed up. Satanism, anti-Christianity, blasphemy, desecration, occultism, Luciferianism. I think half of those words are kind of like unnecessary because if you go through the lyrics, I went through all the album lyrics. You have the certain themes that are always right there. You have the satanic themes like Hail Satan, Hail Lucifer, whatever. You have the lyrics tackling with blasphemy, like spitting on Jesus Christ, renouncing God, blah, 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 or denouncing. And you have lots of blasphemous topics in general. You have some topics with, related to sex, fornication, if you will, etc. And then it's always against Christianity. Nothing wrong with that, but it's quite narrow in terms of attacking religions. You don't see other religions so much getting the punch than Christianity, which is there even one of the songs like End All Christianity. So it's always basically doing the same. And this is for the better or worse. Better for those who like the Archgoat style. Like, you're not there to just like looking for something new, something maybe philosophical. You might even argue that the Archgoat lyrics in general tend to be rather kind of simplistic. You might say they are adolescent. I don't consider it a bad thing, but just saying, you don't really find them like a thinking man's thing. It's more like, let's get bestial, let's get black metal, let's get just those goats out there and let's penetrate some, I don't know, angels or Jesus Christ and the cross or whatever. So it's always pretty much the same. Talking about the covers then again, you get to see the pattern. Here you have an angel. Yes, and some symbols. This is not actually that much, an aggressive one versus what you might have later on. Now you have the traditional goat here and, well, more symbols. But it gets aggressive, more aggressive throughout the years. If you take a look at these Not this one. This has a kind of homage to the Rospe cemetery. But here, death is very much present, and the symbols, angel, and all that stuff. But later on, you go, for example, here, Luciferian crown. Okay, this is kind of a mess, or it's a mass, and the god is right there. The god being the goat, Satan. And you have all the naked people, and while there's not exactly very much violent, maybe it's more sexual in nature, there's more aggression, intensity. And the latest album, well, now you get the violent part where the angels are wrapped in ropes and put to the fire, where the skeletal trumpets players are right there, and the goatee character with torches and all. As you can see, there are lots of same themes happening on the albums, but you can really say they are the one and the same all the time. So there's change, there's a kind of a progression, if you will, or storyline, if you want to go that far. But is it curious enough that they have been going on with Chris Moyen all the time, who has been recognized by a lot of underground metal bands, especially in the death metal and black metal territory. I was trying to figure out which one Moyen has done more. I would say death metal by gut feeling, but I don't know. There are lots of black metal bands that worked with Moyen as well. And his trademark style is very, very fitting. I mean, you couldn't really figure out what Archgoat would do if, God forbid, Moyen would die or say that I'm done, I don't do graphics anymore, because they go hand in hand. It's almost like the vocal styles with the given band. You have the strong death metallic vocals with these blasphemic lyrics, and then Chris Moyen art, and the kind of a heavy guitar sound which is always there. Not super produced, but very, very fitting what Archgoat is doing. So you have certain themes proving that Archgoat doesn't really have to renew themselves. They don't have to change. They don't have to be anything else except what they are. And for that, I respect the band a lot. Now the big question is, how would I rate the albums? Well, this is kind of a tricky because in my opinion, all the albums are roughly in the same quality box, saying they're not absolute 5-star albums, but then again, nothing really goes beyond 4 stars. So I would say the early works, these are my least favorites when it comes to the albums of the band. Maybe, can't point it at my head, I would say maybe the debut album is the weakest, but maybe it's actually the Light Devouring Darkness. Anyhow, these two in my opinion are the weakest, and still they are good. But the better ones, I would say probably Luciferian Crown is the best. But then again, it might be Worship to Eternal Darkness. I'm saying this maybe because they're so close to one another in terms of quality that it's hard for me to decide which one I actually like more. So the Apocalyptic Triumphator falls in the middle. So if you want to go in my designated worst to best, you can pretty much just go from the start to the later parts and you're close enough. If you want to go exactly, I couldn't really give you the exact order. Like I said, I think the latest 2 albums are the best ones. So there you have it. But all in all, good band, and all the albums are worth owning if you like the bestial death black metal to begin with. So, in my opinion, a good band that deserves still more attention, and I only wish that they would make more albums. Always been solid live. I've seen them many, many times. Sometimes it felt like too often because they were in my home city and they played in Finland a lot. Now that the main man lives in Germany, and the other guys in Finland, they don't play here that as often. So in case you're wondering whether or not you're going to see them live, when is the chance? Do it. There's no later time. Now I know this video became a lot longer than I anticipated because I felt like there's so many things I need to address, so many things I need to talk about. But I find this band very good. It's definitely still one of the corners of Finnish black metal scene, even if their style is half death metal, half black metal. And I think you should go through them in order to understand what Finnish black metal or black death is made of, what it's supposed to sound like and all. So off you go, and if you still haven't watched my interview with the main man of the band a few years ago, well, I will be linking it to this video in the end. So there you go. I hope you enjoy it. Now go listen, go blast some Archgoat and have a good time with it. Now off you go, and please let me know if you're a fan of the band, which albums you like the most. Let me know in the comments box and we can go on from that. Now, bye bye.